All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. Today, we're going deep on Odin. You probably know him as the inspiration for Wednesday, but get ready because there's a lot more to him than you might think. We've got two online encyclopedias worth of info to sort through.
Oh, yeah, that's the thing about these mythological figures. They're way more interesting than the original myths. You just get like these watered-down pop culture versions. But when you go back to the original sources, it's a whole different story.
It's like rediscovering them all over again. So we're talking about Odin, right? Huge figure in Norse mythology. I mean, the Germanic people really worship this guy. But he's not just the god of war, is he?
No, not at all. I mean, he's definitely associated with war, but his domains are so much broader than that. You've got wisdom, healing, even death, royalty, knowledge, sorcery, poetry. He's even tied to frenzy, magic, and the runic alphabet.
Wow, that's a lot. He's like the divine CEO of Asgard with all those responsibilities. Okay, so all those different domains, does that explain why he has so many names? It's like it's got a different title for every occasion.
Exactly. I mean, the sources mention hundreds of names for Odin. Each one highlights a different facet of him, his character, the myths he's involved in. For example, Raven God, that hints at his connection with those birds. They're like his eyes and ears. Then you've got the High One, which shows like his position of authority.
And then you have the name Odin itself, right? I mean, it's not just a cool sounding name.
Right, Odin. It comes from the Proto-Germanic Wisianas. That means something like Lord of Frenzy or even Leader of the Possessed. It definitely gives you a glimpse into his wilder side, the ecstatic, the inspired, maybe even a little bit unhinged, you could say.
Okay, intense. So we've got this powerful god, multifaceted, a name for every day of the week. But what about his family? What's the divine family drama like?
Oh, well, it wouldn't be mythology without some family drama, right? Let's see. His parents are Bor and Besla. She's a giantess. His wife, Frigg, she's a pretty powerful figure herself. And then there are his sons.
Sons like Thor, right? Odin's son with Yora, the personification of Earth. I mean, everyone knows Thor, god of thunder, the hammer-wielding Avenger. But I'm guessing there's more to that father-son relationship than we see in the movies.
Oh, definitely. And it's not just Thor. Odin has other sons, like Balder and Húir. Their stories, well, they're full of heroism and tragedy. And those family ties, the conflicts, they all add another dimension to Odin's character.
It's like we're getting a peek behind the curtain of Asgard. Right. Okay, so we're starting to get a sense of the family dynamics here, but let's talk visuals. What does this guy actually look like?
Picture this.
Yeah.
One-eyed, long flowing beard, wielding this spear Gungnir, and he's riding an eight-legged horse, Sleipnir. It's a pretty striking image.
Yeah, that's the Odin I know from like pop culture, but wait, hold on. One-eyed. Isn't that a big deal for a god?
It is, and there's a pretty amazing story behind it. So Odin, he sacrifices his eye to drink from this, Mimir's, the source of ultimate knowledge. It's a real act of self-sacrifice to gain wisdom.
Wow, he literally gave an eye for knowledge. Talk about commitment. But does
Yeah.
he ever get satisfied, Or is he just constantly searching for more knowledge?
Yeah, it seems like the thirst for knowledge is never really quenched for Odin. He's always pushing the boundaries, seeking deeper
Yeah.
understanding.
Like that time he hung himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and nights, wounded by a spear, all to gain knowledge of the runes.
It's is pretty hardcore. That story, it's in the Havamal. And it really sums up Odin's character. The suffering, the endurance, the relentless focus on obtaining knowledge, it's all there. It also shows you how important knowledge and sacrifice are in Norse mythology.
You have to wonder, if a god's willing to go that far for knowledge, what should we be willing to do to understand, the world around us?
That's a good question. But before we go too deep on that, we should probably talk about Odin's famous Hall Valhalla.
Oh yeah, Valhalla, the place where he welcomes half of those who die in battle, right? Chosen by the Valkyries. I've always pictured it as this massive mead hall with never-ending feasts and epic battles.
You're not far off. It's definitely a place of heroic feasting and camaraderie, but it's also about preparing for Ragnarok, the final battle of the gods. There's this sense of purpose, destiny.
Wait, you said Odin welcomes half of those who die in battle? Where does the other half go?
They go to Folkvanger. It's ruled by the goddess Freyja, But we're focusing on Valhalla in this deep dive. It really shows Odin's role as a god of war and like the one who gets everyone ready for Ragnarok. It's kind of a contrast to that gentler image of him as a wise, knowledge-seeking god, isn't it?
It is. It's like he's two different gods in one. But before we get to that, I'm curious, how does Odin fit into actual history? Do we have like hard evidence for him outside the myths?
We do. He's actually mentioned throughout Germanic history. You even find Roman accounts, as early as Tacitus, who equate Odin with Mercury. Shows you how widespread his worship was.
And it's not just written accounts, right? We've got archaeological evidence, too, like those migration period bracteates, those little gold amulets. You've got this figure on horseback flanked by birds. Those are thought to be Odin with his ravens, Hugin and Munin.
Exactly. The bracteates are a great example. But there's other stuff, too. Vendel period helmet plates, picture stones from Gotland showing 8-legged horses, even fragments of the Osberg tapestry. And then there's that silver figurine nicknamed Odin from Ligeray.
It's amazing how these objects really bring the myths to life, but it also makes me wonder, these artifacts are from different times and places, so how do we know it's really Odin? Could it be other gods, or mythological figures?
It's a good question, and it kind of takes us into the realm of scholarly debate. Some symbols, like that 8-legged horse Sleipnir, are pretty unique to Odin. But there's always room for interpretation, especially when you're dealing with these ancient artifacts.
So how do we untangle Odin from all these other figures? And where did he even come from? I mean, we've got all these aspects of his character, his domains, but what are his origins?
That's what we'll be unpacking in part 2. And that's where things get really interesting.
Welcome back to our deep dive on Odin. Last time we were talking about Odin's origins and how to make sense of all his different, almost contradictory sides.
Right. He's this complex figure who embodies, like, seemingly opposite ideas. War and wisdom, frenzy and poetry. It's really tough to pin him down.
So how do we even start to unravel the mystery of his origins? I remember you mentioned that some scholars believe he might be a relative newcomer to the Norse pantheon, maybe introduced from outside Scandinavia.
Yes, some scholars point to the similarities between Odin's name and stories and those of deities in other Indo-European cultures, particularly in southeastern Europe. This has led to theories that he might have been, integrated into Norse mythology from elsewhere.
So instead of originating in Scandinavia, he might be a kind of divine immigrant, bringing his own myths and attributes with him. That would explain why he seems so distinct from the other Norse gods.
That's one possibility. Another theory is that Odin represents a fusion of older indigenous beliefs with newer ideas that came from outside. It's a sort of cultural blending where different traditions, mix and influence each other over time.
That's fascinating. It's like Odin embodies this meeting point of different cultures and belief systems. What about those connections to even older Proto-Indo-European mythology? Where does that fit in?
Well, that's where Georges Dumézil's trifunctional hypothesis comes in. It's a theory that suggests many Indo-European pantheons are structured around these 3 core functions: sovereignty, war, and fertility.
Okay, so we have this 3-part structure for the gods. Where does Odin fit in? Is he the war guy, the fertility god, or something else entirely?
He's actually associated with sovereignty. In this framework, he's grouped with figures like the Hindu god Varua, both representing like kingship, magic, wisdom, and the more mystical aspects of rulership.
So not just a warrior king, but like a magician king. That explains his obsession with knowledge and willingness to sacrifice an eye for it. He's driven by this need to understand, the deeper workings of the cosmos, to acquire the wisdom needed to rule effectively.
Exactly. This connection to sovereignty helps us understand why he's often depicted as, a wise ruler, a lawgiver, a dispenser of knowledge. He represents a more intellectual and spiritual aspect of power, as opposed to just brute force.
Okay, that makes sense. But you also compared him to Rudra and Hermes earlier. Those seem like pretty different gods at first glance. What are the connections there?
You're right. They might seem different on the surface, but when you look closer, there are these intriguing similarities. All 3 figures are associated with this boundary crossing, trickery, and a certain wildness or frenzy. They represent those aspects of human nature that push beyond the norm, that embrace chaos and disruption.
So it's not just wisdom and sovereignty. There's this darker, more unpredictable energy to Odin as well. It almost seems like he embodies both the order and the chaos of the cosmos.
And that's what makes him so fascinating. He represents those darker, more untamed aspects of the human psyche, He's the part of us that craves knowledge, power, and experience, even if it means pushing the boundaries of what's considered acceptable.
It's almost like he's a walking contradiction. A wise ruler, but also a wild trickster. A seeker of knowledge, but also a master of magic and frenzy. It's no wonder scholars have so many different interpretations of his origins.
Absolutely. There's no one single definitive answer when it comes to mythology. Academic debate is all about, exploring different perspectives and interpretations. That's how we deepen our understanding of these complex figures.
So are there any other perspectives on Odin's origins we haven't covered yet? Do any scholars disagree with these theories about him being an imported god or a fusion of different traditions?
Of course. Some argue that Odin might have been a relatively late development within Germanic mythology, possibly gaining prominence during the migration period or the Viking Age.
That's interesting. So instead of coming from outside, he might have emerged from within Germanic culture, but at a later point in time.
Precisely. This theory suggests that Odin might be a product of those turbulent times, reflecting the values and anxieties of a society undergoing huge changes. It's like the myths themselves evolved to reflect the changing world around them.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like how stories get passed down through generations, with each storyteller adding their own twist or interpretation, shaping the narrative to fit their current circumstances.
Exactly. Myths and legends are living things. They're constantly evolving and adapting to reflect the changing circumstances of the people who tell them.
So even though we might not be able to definitively pinpoint Odin's exact origins, we can still learn a lot about him by examining the different ways he was perceived and interpreted throughout history. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, with each theory and interpretation offering a different piece of the bigger picture.
And that's the beauty of it. The act of grappling with these conflicting theories actually deepens our understanding of this complex and fascinating figure. We see him not as a static, one-dimensional character, but as a dynamic force that has been shaped and reshaped by different cultures and historical periods.
It's like we're getting multiple perspectives on the same story, each one revealing something new and intriguing about Odin. So we've delved into the theories, the interpretations, the academic debates. But what about Odin's legacy? What impact has he had on culture and society, both past and present? It seems like he's everywhere these days, from Marvel movies to Wednesday memes.
That's right. Odin's legacy is vast and multifaceted. He's inspired countless works of art, literature, music, even video games. He's become this iconic figure representing wisdom, power, and a certain rebellious spirit that continues to resonate with people today.
And let's not forget his connection to Wednesday. It's pretty remarkable that we still use his name for a day of the week. It speaks to the lasting impact of Norse mythology on our language and culture.
Absolutely. But Odin's legacy goes beyond pop culture and language. It also extends to the realm of religion and spirituality. In recent decades, there's been this resurgence of interest in pre-Christian religions, including heathenry, which often incorporates elements of Norse mythology.
And I'm guessing Odin plays a pretty central role in those beliefs.
He does. For many heathens, Odin represents a connection to their ancestral heritage, a source of wisdom and inspiration, and a model for living a life of courage, honor, and self-discovery.
It's amazing how these ancient beliefs and figures can still resonate with people today, offering meaning and guidance in such a complex world.
It's a testament to the enduring power of mythology. Even in the 21st century, it has the power to connect us to something larger than ourselves, to tap into these universal themes, and to inspire us to live more meaningful lives.
So what's the takeaway here? What can we learn from Odin's enduring legacy?
I think the key takeaway is that even though the myths and legends surrounding Odin might have originated centuries ago, they still have something to teach us today. Like the importance of seeking knowledge, even if it means making sacrifices, the power of resilience and self-reliance, the value of honoring our heritage, both personal and cultural, and the enduring appeal of stories that connect us to the deeper mysteries of life.
That's a lot to unpack.
It is. But I think it's worth reflecting on. After all, if Odin was willing to sacrifice an eye for wisdom, what are we willing to do to gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us?
That's a great question to ponder. And speaking of pondering, we're going to need a short break to gather our thoughts and prepare for the final part of our Odin Deep Dive. Welcome back to our Odin Deep Dive. We've been talking about his many names and domains, his complex family, and the mysteries surrounding his origins.
And we've explored a lot of different theories, too, about where he might have come from. Could he have come from outside Scandinavia? Or maybe he's a fusion of different cultural influences.
And even the possibility that he emerged as a prominent figure later on in Germanic history.
It's really fascinating stuff. But through it all, one thing remains clear. Odin is a walking paradox.
Exactly. He's this god of war, but also wisdom, poetry, and frenzy. It's like he embodies order and chaos at the same time, both creation and destruction.
And those contradictions are what make him so interesting, don't you think? He's like a reflection of us, with all our complexities and inner struggles.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to human nature, showing us all its different facets, the light and the shadow.
And that's the power of mythology, right? It gives us a way to explore these complex themes without, getting overwhelmed by them. We can grapple with these big questions about life and death, good and evil, fate and free will, all in a safe space.
It's like a testing ground for real life,
Exactly. And I think that's why Odin continues to fascinate us. He's not just a simple one-dimensional character. He's a force of nature who embodies the whole range of human experience.
He's not just a god of war or a god of wisdom or even a god of poetry. He's a god of everything, of life itself, with all its messiness and beauty, its triumphs and tragedies.
And I think that's why, even though these stories about him are so ancient, they still resonate with us today. They still have something to teach us.
So after all this, what are the key takeaways? What can we learn from Odin and his legacy?
Well, one of the biggest lessons, I think, is that there's always more to learn, more to discover, more to understand about ourselves and the world around us, just like Odin, on his never-ending quest for knowledge.
Like he's urging us to never stop questioning, never stop exploring, never stop pushing the boundaries of our understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And just as Odin was willing to sacrifice an eye for wisdom, we need to be willing to challenge our assumptions, explore different perspectives, even embrace the complexities of life if we really want to grow.
It's not just about accumulating knowledge, it's about being open to new experiences, challenging our beliefs, getting out of our comfort zones.
And that journey, it can be tough, uncomfortable even.
Oh.
But it can also lead to amazing discoveries. Just like Odin's quest for knowledge led him to sacrifice and hardship. But in the end, it brought him greater wisdom and understanding.
So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into these fascinating worlds of mythology.
You never know what you might learn about yourself along the way.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into the world of Odin. We hope you enjoyed this journey with us.
And remember, there's always more out there to discover, more to explore, more to understand. So keep those minds curious and never stop seeking knowledge.